Maya is the word we use to describe how the impossible seems possible.
Said Maya?
Maya. Consciousness is one without a second. There is no otherness. There's no place where consciousness is absent. And consciousness is vijnana ghanam, a homogeneous mass of pure consciousness everywhere. It is kutusta, it is stable. It never moves, it never changes. But somehow, a world of name and form appears in it. And we have two classic images given to us in Scripture. Each one gives us a partial understanding. First is waves in the ocean. Shankara talked about the waves and the froth and the bubbles. It's nothing but the ocean appearing as the waves and the bubbles. So, all the forms of the waves are nothing but the ocean appearing as that. So also the phenomenal world is nothing but consciousness appearing as name and form. The other great image that's given us is like the city in the mirror. So if you you go up to Twin Peaks and you turn your back to the downtown and hold up a mirror, you can see Market Street. You can see all the cars going up and down Market Street. You can see the traffic and the people walking. You can see movement and you can see space in the mirror. How can you put all of San Francisco downtown in a little tiny mirror? There it is. But what it is the surface of the mirror appearing as the pratibimba, the image, the reflection in it. In fact, it's the surface of the mirror that appears as the city. But the surface of the mirror undergoes no change. It simply has the quality of being able to reflect. This image falls short because in order to have the city in the mirror, you have to have an external object to create the image. So neither one of our examples by themselves works. We have to combine them. And the easiest way to understand that is the dream state. So in the dream state, my one unified mind seems to refract into a dream body with a dream ego, with dream senses, seeing a world, the dream world of name and form outside, and I have dream thoughts and feelings inside, and I have dream ignorance. I don't know it's a dream while I'm dreaming. So am I in the dream? No. Is the dream in me? Yeah, kinda. Is the dream really me? Can I take the objects of the dream out of my ear and put them on the table? No, they're not really there. So also, somehow consciousness, the Lord by means of his Maya Shakti, seemingly forks into subject object. It looks like two, Dvaita, but it's not two. Advaita. Practically speaking, what does this mean? Not only must I go through the process of subject-object discrimination, so I'm very clear, I am that witnessing consciousness. I'm never changed, I'm never touched, I'm never altered by it. But what is this world? What is this world? It's just a play. Scripture uses terms like lila, means play, a sport, or a drama, has both meanings. Take it easy. It's all going to work out. It's all okay. Don't worry. Because it's all God. All. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
दर्शन दृश्यादि भावशून्यैकवस्तुनि निर्विकारे निराकारे निर्विशेषेभिधा कुतः. In the one reality which is without the seer, the seeing, and the seen, etc., which is the changeless, formless, absolute, how can there be any diversity?
So there appears diversity, but it is an appearance. Over and over again, we have these ideas, seen but not real. The train tracks appear to join in the distance, seen but not real. The container ships falling off the edge of the world as they reach the horizon, seen but not real. The bowl of the sky above, seen but not real. The rainbow in the sky looking so solid, seen but not real. So also, the phenomenal world is seen. It appears as nama rupa, name and form. But it's all God, it's all Brahman. Including your body, mind, and intellect, and ego, all of it. It's all part of the great play of the divine. It's all God. So there's not Brahman plus nasty old matter. There's not I am Brahman, but all the rest of you are jerks. Oh. Everyone, everything is God appearing as name and form. Right there in the world of name and form, God is. Now, I'm very fond of the Christian saint. He's one of my heroes, St. Francis. I'm convinced that he was a realized soul. And the way he articulated this in the language that he had available was this tremendous sense of connectedness with everything. Famous phrase, brother, sun, sister, moon, etc. Sense of relatedness. It goes even deeper, a sense of oneness with everything. And if you go, say, walking in the park, and with your mind tuned up, you look at a flower, it will reveal such beauty to you. In the words of the philosophers, Vedanta is not pantheism. Pantheism is God is everything in nature. It's panentheism. God is everything in nature and much more.
What's that word again?
Panentheism.
Panentheism. Yeah, sorry.
Panentheism. Panentheism. So again, the practice is dial down our reactivity, dial down aversion and attraction. If they arise, they're just more forms of the divine. Don't get too caught up in it. Endeavoring to see the face of God in every person you meet, in everything, every situation you encounter. Next verse.
Kalparnava Nivatyanta Paripurnaikavastuni Nirvikare Nirakare Nirvisheshe Bhidakutaha. In that one reality which is all pervading and motionless, like the ocean after the dissolution of the universe, which is the changeless, formless absolute, how can there be any diversity?
So when one sees that consciousness itself is motionless, sthita. And here it's a reference to a mythological reference, the waters after the dissolution of the universe. Everything is still. Water is always a classic metaphor for consciousness. So as you meditate and you thin your mind, you will see the world of name and form thin away. This is not just philosophy. This is direct experience. If it's not your direct experience yet, no problem. Put this on the shelf and continue to tune up the mind. Continue to renounce everything. Next verse.
Tejasiva tamo yatra pralinam bhranti karanam advitiye pare tatte nirvisheshe bhida kutaha. How can there be any diversity in the supreme reality which is non-dual and absolute, where the very root of delusion dissolves like darkness into light?
Yes, Bhranti, delusion. When we have that non-dual realization, my senses report diversity, but my knowledge is It's all Brahman. Again, we can look at the classic Vedanta image of like mirage waters in the desert. When I see the mirage in the desert, originally at first, my senses report water and my knowledge is water. If I keep driving towards the mirage, I see it seeming to recede. Then I have the insight. It's not water. It's heat waves off the sand. My senses continue to report water, but my knowledge is sand. So also for the yogi, their senses report a world of name and form, but their knowledge is Sarvam Kalvidam Brahman. All this is verily God. Next one.
Ekatmake pare tattve vedavarta katham vaset sushuptau sukamatrayam veda kenavalokitah. In the one, the supreme reality, how can there be any talk of diversity? Who can ever observe any diversity? The total bliss of deep sleep.
Yes. So we can see that when the mind is wrapped up in deep sleep, when the mind is not available for thoughting, there's no ego sense and no perception of the world. And everybody enjoys a deep sleep. It's blissful. So the ramifications of this idea are profound. You must have a mind in order to be miserable. You do not need a mind in order to be blissful. How do I stop the mind ultimately? When the mind itself quits believing its own stupid thoughts. Swamiji used to say, when the mind commits harakiri, means it commits suicide. How does the mind commit suicide? When the mind grasps. There's no personal sense of self. There's no problem out there. There's no joy-giving stuff out there. It's just a psychic optical illusion. Pretty. But I use the phrase, it becomes trinkets and baubles. That's all it is. Nothing of value. Next verse.
Nahyasti vishvam paratatvabodhat sadatmani brahmani nirvikalpe kalatraye napyahi rikshato gune nahyam bhuvim durmriga trishnakayam. Even before realization of the supreme truth, the universe does not exist in the absolute Brahman, the quintessence of existence. Never in the three periods of time is the snake in the rope, or a drop of water in the mirage.
So it isn't that there used to be a world there, and then for me it disappears finally. Whether I believe in the world or not does not at all affect the truth of its fundamental, non-separate existence. Let me give you an example. In Europe, for hundreds and hundreds of years, very well-educated people thought that the earth was flat. And if you sailed west, you'd fall off the edge of it. Very, very well-educated people thought the earth was the center of the universe. The sun revolved around the earth. The moon revolved around the earth. The planets revolved around the earth. If you've studied astrology, you've heard the term, oh, Mercury's in retrograde. Mercury never moves backwards, really. It just looks that way as it orbits the sun. Very wise and intelligent people believe this. Never made it true. So also, even though we believe the world of name and form is real, doesn't make it so. It's always been like a hologram. As and is. The phenomenal world is consciousness appearing as name and form. Right where that problematic condition is, there God is. There's nothing but God there, whose nature is Satchidananda. And Shankara says, where is the snake? Did I have to grab the rope and wring it out to get snake out of the rope? No. The snake in the rope is a misapprehension. It's a wrong perception. So if you see with two eyes, duality, me and other, good and bad, heaven, hell, right, wrong, you suffer. But if you see with a single eye, called the Jnana Chakshu, the eye of wisdom, it's all eye. I think we talked about this, was either last week or the week before, when Lord Shiva opens his third eye, he burns the whole universe to ashes. This doesn't mean there's some God out there who's going to open an actual eye and it's going to be Armageddon. No. It means when you see with the non-dual vision, the solid, separate world of name and form, people who give you problems, and bosses who don't do it right, and relatives that you can't stand. All of that is gone. Doesn't mean you don't see them walking around. But you see it all as Brahman alone. Don't believe me. Keep tuning up the mind. Keep being empty. Everything is passed through. Next one.
Maya matramidam dvaitam advaitam paramarthatah iti brute shruti sakshat sushupta vanubhutaye. The scriptures directly declare that all duality is nothing but Maya. The reality alone is the absolute truth. Such also is the experience in deep sleep.
Yes. So here Shankara does his classic footnote. This is not just his opinion, but the scriptures thunder it. The scriptures thunder it.
What are they thundering exactly?
They thunder that it's all consciousness, it's all Brahman.
Okay. Sorry.
And then he says, even before realization, you have an indication that your perception of the world is completely dependent on the movement of the mind. Every time you have deep sleep, your world disappears. But in deep sleep, the mind is still covered by pure ignorance. So you have no knowledge that it's all Brahman. Next one.
Ananyatvam adhishtanadaropyasya nirikshatam panditairajju sarpadau vikalpo bhranti jivanaha. The wise have observed that the superimposition is identical with its substratum, just as the rope and the snake. The difference exists only because of delusion.
So it's not the jiva, the individuality, plus Brahman. I'm not going to achieve Brahman. I'm not going to attain Brahman. I'm not going to become Brahman. The idea that I am an individual, that I am a person, is delusion. What do I need to do? Remove the delusion. How do I do it? How do I find out that it's not a snake, that it's really a rope? I investigate. So also, in a mind made very pure, very subtle, through the practice of samadhi, end the mind, or at least thin the mind. Other scriptures use the term tanu manasaha, thinness of mind. I like to call it lace curtain mind. So you can have bright, clean windows, and you can look out your windows and see the street below. But I don't have them now. In the old-timey days, I used to have lace curtains in the dining room. You could stand in the dining room and you could look out through the lace curtains and see the traffic. So this thinness of mind, I haven't got rid of everything yet. I just got rid of enough to be able to apprehend the background, the substratum, the support of it all. The other image that Shankara uses that I like, he says, in the pre-dawn gloaming. So what's the difference between dawn and sunrise? Sunrise is when the sun actually comes up over the horizon. Dawn is when you have enough light to be able to start to see stuff. That's called aruna in Sanskrit. So even before the orb of the sun is visible, there's enough light to see stuff. Likewise, just in our thinning of the mind, the nature of the self becomes apparent. And then the bright sunrise of knowledge dawns. Everything falls. Next verse.
Chittamulo vikalpoyam chitta bhavena kaschana ataschittam samadhehi pratyagrupe paratmani. The apparent universe has its root in the mind and cannot exist once the mind is annihilated. Therefore, dissolve the mind by fixing it on the most subjective Supreme Self.
So these words chit and chitta are related. Chitta is mind stuff. Mind as it appears as sense perception, feeling, thought, images, memory. We call that chitta. It comes into existence because of the flow of vrittis of some sort, thought waves. Stop the flow of thought, and chitta is seen to be nothing but chit. Swamiji would illustrate this by what he called his spiritual algebra. Mind, M, equals A, the awareness, plus V, vritti. We'll do it that way. Take the vrittis, move them to the other side of the equation. Mind minus vrittis equals pure awareness. When the thoughts are thoughting, it is like if you're peeping through the tube made by your two hands. It seems like my vision is limited. That's like the self peeping through the subtle intellect, illuminating the equipment. But if I stop the mind, nothing's happened to my eyeball. But all of a sudden, my vision is wide and expansive. Nothing changed in my eyes. Just the equipment through which it was peeping stopped. Now, this relationship between the flow of thought, the vrittis, which manifest as chitta, the stuff of mind, sense perception, feeling, thought, memory, images, attention, etc. Shankara's grandfather guru, Gaudapada, uses a marvelous image. It's called the Alata Shanti, the quenching of the firebrand. I update the image. It's the sparkler on Diwali or the 4th of July. So on a holiday, if you have a sparkler and it's dark, you can take the sparkler and you can make a circle in the sparkler. Now the circle is seen. That's like the apparent movement of the vrittis. You see the circle. But I cannot grab the circle, put it around my neck as a necklace. I can't make a figure 8, take them and use them for handcuffs. But what happens to the circle and the sparkler when I stop moving the sparkler? Gone. So also, chitta, with its various forms and images and perceptions and all the stuff that makes up the world. Stop the mind, bringing the sparkler to a single point. It all goes away. All my problems are in the mind, without exception. How do I do this? Bring the mind to a state of purity. Then this radical reversal of our attention. Absorb the mind in the self itself. Watch the world disappear. Next one.
Kimapi satataboධं केवलानन्दरूपं निरुपमं अतिवेलं नित्यमुक्तं निरीहं निरवधिगगनाभं निष्कलं निर्विकल्पं हृदि कलयति विद्वान् ब्रह्मपूर्णं समाधौ. Through samadhi, the wise man realized the infinite Brahman in his heart as something inexplicably of the essence of eternal knowledge and complete bliss, which is unparalleled, which is beyond all limitations, which is ever free, which has no activity, and which is indivisible and absolute like the limitless sky.
So through samadhi, we know beyond the shadow of a doubt that I'm not a person, that no personal sense of self is real. It's gone. It's gone. And there's never any doubt about our essential nature. So be careful. Don't go chasing nirvikalpa. For some people, it's a profound bang. Everything is gone. For others, it can just be a subtle shift. But the fruit of it is what's important. Do you have any doubts about your essential nature? That's what's important. Go off on meditation retreats, spend hours and hours and hours a day meditating. It can be of value. But I can remember more than one student who's pretty rooted. It's the term I use. I come back and I say, do you know any more self? You either know who you are or you don't. You either think the snake is real, you see the rope. You either think there's water in the desert, or you know it's an optical illusion. If you think you are the body and the personality, Granti, delusion. If you know that your nature is Satchidananda, pure existence, pure consciousness, this absolute. That's what's important. Next verse.
Prakriti Vikriti Shunyam Bhavanatita Bhavam Samarasamasamanam Manasambandhaduram Nigama Vachana Siddham Nityam Asmat Prasiddham Hridi Kalayati Vidvan Brahma Purnam Samadhau. Through samadhi, the wise man realizes the infinite Brahman in his heart, as devoid of the concepts of cause and effect, as a reality beyond all fancy, as homogeneous and matchless, beyond all proofs, established by the declarations of the scriptures, always ingrained in us as the ego.
Yes. So it's the substratum of all the various impressions of I. And here Shankara again talks about the non-reality of cause and effect. the way I like to explain it, I don't know if any of you, like me, have flying dreams. I think Freud would have a heyday with that. So, being an old teacher, of course, I teach flying in my dreams. And in one particular dream, I've only had this one once. There was a bunch of people standing in front of me, and I was talking to them, and I said, flying is controlled falling. It's all in the breath. And we just went. We all just like levitated. Very cool. So in the dream, there was cause and effect. If you just went, you would levitate off the ground and fly. But from the waking state, no. The cause and effect of the dream was not real. Listen carefully. The cause and effect of this world is not real. Now, the scriptures use this term called vyavahara, which means doing business, transaction. Within the dream of the waking state, of course we have cause and effect. You put gas in the car and that's what makes it go. You grab the remote, you turn on the TV turns on. You open Microsoft Word and the word processor shows up. Cause and effect. But what Shankar is saying is, actually, this is just mind. Now, the implications of this are profound. Because if you have the firm belief, this bug has caused that disease, this trauma in childhood has caused this mental illness. Yoga says that's not necessarily true. It is no more real than the cause and effect in a dream. So yoga says we have a lot more freedom than we think.
Freedom in what, Jim? Exactly.
I didn't hear you there.
What do you mean by freedom?
It means what I think I'm bound by as fate is not necessarily true.
Okay.
Change the sankalpa and you will change your experience of the world. And this is the idea, and all the forms of spiritual healing are based. This is why the Master Jesus said, whatsoever you ask, believing, so shall you receive. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. All intimations of the world being far more plastic than we think. All of that is teaching for another day. All right, next one.
अजरममरमस्ताभाववस्तुस्वरूपम् स्थिमितसलीलराशिप्रख्यामाख्याविहीनम् शमितगुणविकारं शाश्वतं शान्तमेकम् हृदि कलयति विद्वान् ब्रह्मपूर्णं समाधौ. Through samadhi, the wise man realizes the infinite Brahman in his heart as undecaying and immortal, as a positive entity which debars all negations, which is like a calm ocean which has no name, in which there are neither merits nor demerits, which is eternal, tranquil, and one.
So again, in the language of poetry, he takes a broadside to the Shunyavadins. The Shunyavadins we call the scholiasts of the void. It's a particular school of Buddhists who posit that ultimate reality is void. It's empty. There is no truth. There's nothing there. Everything is illusion. There is no ultimate reality. And here Shankar says, no. Yes, your material view of the world is illusion. Your belief in a personal sense of self is an illusion. But you are a positive entity. In Gita, we have a term called Purushottama, whole chapter, Purushottama Yoga. Uttama Purusha, ultimate. Purusha means person, also means spirit, another name for the self. It actually means person. And the meditation that implies is what is the ultimate essence of personness? What makes you you? I don't know. Anybody else put on weight during COVID?
Yes.
Aren't you still you? Or I do what I call the amputation meditation. I cut my feet off. Am I still me? And you see, no part of the body is me. And one of the things so many of us who are old find so funny, you get out of the shower and you stand in front of a full-length mirror and you go, what happened? Where was the body of my youth? Gone. But I'm still me. Is it experiences? Is it gender? Is it feelings? Is it beliefs? Is it thought? No. I'm me. So the self is an entity. It is the entity. You are a conscious, living being. You are sentient. You are life itself. Everything else is jada, inert. You are the only living thing. 16th verse in the second chapter of Gita, Krishna plays with these two words, Sat and Bhava. He basically says, only being has existence. There is no non-being for anything that really is. In our everyday description, we talk about things and beings. The table's a thing, the chair's a thing, Vishwa is a being. Now, what Gita is saying here is actually, if it has no being, it isn't really there, it's just imagination. The only thing that Sat has existence is being. Something that's alive, something that's sentient, the one conscious entity. Marvelous thing to meditate on. And there's only one of us here. It is Kevala, alone. Not a bunch of little beings. One being. Your experience of the self, listen carefully, is the totality of Brahman. Indivisible. It's without dimension. Sometimes it seems like a little point. Sometimes it seems vast and like the sky. But in fact, it is without dimension. Dimension occurs in it. Fabulous, fabulous meditation. All right, let's do one more.
Samahitantah karana swarupe vilokayatmana akhanda vaibhavam vichindhi bandham bhavagandha gandhitam yatnena pumstvam sabhali kurushva. With a controlled mind in samadhi, seeing your own self, the Atman of undying splendor. Cut off your bondages which have been strengthened by the impressions of your previous births, and successfully strive to realize the fulfillment of a human birth.
Yes.
Wow.
So this is what is to be done. This is the purpose of your life. Give up this illusory world. Give up your identifications, all of them. Tune up the mind. Keep it absorbed in the self. All. Finish the business. All right, it's a good place to stop. We have time for questions.
What's the next verse? Number.
413.
Ganesh, what is it?
413, 413 is the next verse.
413 is the next verse. Thank you.
Jim, can I clarify something you said a few verses ago?
Certainly.
You said that,
Speak loudly
Oh.
so they can hear.
oh yes, you said that cause and effect are not as related as we think they are. They're not so solid.
They're not real.
They're not, okay, you're
I
saying they're
didn't
not,
say they're not related.
okay, that they're not real. So I think in one of the talks by Swamiji, The Logic of Spirituality, he says, I don't know if this contradicts that the effect is nothing but the cause in different forms.
That's true.
Okay.
It depends on from what viewpoint we're looking. So if we, remember when he says that in Gita, is
Mhm.
what he says. So in Gita, remember that it teaches from 3 levels.
Yes.
The first is Dharma Shastra, yamas and niyamas, yamas and niyamas, do's and don'ts.
Mhm.
Then a lot of it teaches being identified with Arjuna. In the frame that we're using now, it means you're identified with your subtle body.
Mhm.
It means we're dealing with purifying the head and heart. And we're understanding this world. So when he says the effect is just the cause in a different form,
Mhm.
what he means is what you're doing now is will become something based on what you're doing. Don't expect a different result.
Mhm.
For example, if you want to be a dancer
Mhm.
and you spend all your time doing accounting, what you will be in 10 years is a really good accountant. Do you see that?
I see what you're saying.
If, on the other hand, you take the risk and start your dance study, in 10 years, you'll be a better dancer.
Wow.
But there are other larger social things. For example, fighting for peace
Mhm.
is a contradiction in terms. That's why we teach ahimsa.
Wow.
You cannot fight for peace because violence as a cause can only create violence as an effect.
Yes.
Does that make it a little clearer?
Yes.
Now, what Shankara is doing now is when Krishna speaks before I taught yoga to the sun and the moon, all of these worlds are in me. He's speaking from what we would call a full state of yoga. So it always depends on what level the teaching comes from and to what qualification of the student, basically. So here's Shankara. We're almost finished with the book. He's talking to very, very subtle minds. Does that make it a little clearer?
Yes.
Excellent question. Any others? All right, let's sit.